From Maid to Billionaire, the Heiress they tried to hide. Part 4. Chapter 19. The Ball of Reclamation. Rosehill had never seen an event like this before. Not under the Moreaux name. Not under Clarisse's hand. Not even in the height of Lionel's reign. This wasn't a fundraiser. It wasn't a launch. It wasn't a polite cocktail affair for heirs and hidden mistresses. It was a coronation. An unapologetic celebration of survival, power, and vengeance served in velvet and gold. And Lina called it, without irony, the Ball of Reclamation. The invitations arrived hand-delivered in black satin envelopes sealed with crimson wax. No crest. Just one word embossed in gold, Lina. Each envelope contained a personal summons from the Lady of Rosehill. A clause requiring formal black tie attire. A line at the bottom, in Lina's unmistakable script. Some of you are being invited to witness history. Others to atone. Society trembled. The ones who once whispered about that servant girl now scrambled for gowns and excuses. Rosehill glowed that night like a jewel set on fire. Floodlights bathed the glass floors in soft champagne light. Musicians played a blend of symphonic strings and dark jazz from a stage built over the reflecting pool. The staff wore tailored tuxedos with silver lapel pins bearing a single rose. And Lina. She descended the grand staircase at precisely 9 p.m. in a midnight black ball gown custom-made by a revolutionary Parisian designer. The fabric shimmered like onyx under candlelight, the bodice embroidered with blood-red roses and iron thorns. Around her neck, her mother's pearls. On her hand, the ring Clarisse once tried to bury. And when she stepped onto the glass floor where marble once ruled, she owned it. They came in droves. Old money families. Billionaires. Diplomats. Designers. Critics who had once written her off. Socialites who had whispered in corners, saying things like, "She'll never last. She's not one of us. She's just lucky." Now they lined up for her. And one by one, they kissed her hand. The same hands that had once held a scrub brush now sparkled with vengeance and diamonds. "Lady Moreaux," they murmured. So honored. So humbled. And Lina smiled, gracious and cool. "Of course you are." At 10:14 p.m., a black car arrived at the gate. Inside, Clarisse, dressed in outdated Chanel, clutching a tarnished clutch bag like it was armor. Beside her, Julian, tired and hollow-eyed, the slick hair and easy charm replaced with silence. They tried to step forward. But two guards in tailored security uniforms blocked their path. "Name?" asked the guard, knowingly. "You know who I am," Clarisse snapped. "And you know," he said, "you're not on the list." Clarisse's eyes narrowed. "She has no right to keep me out of this house." "No," the guard interrupted, "you had no right to keep her in it." Julian looked away. Clarisse's voice cracked. "I gave her everything." "You gave her floors to scrub," the guard replied. And with that, the gate closed. They were left outside. Unwelcome. Forgotten. Inside, Lina stood beneath the chandelier once reserved for Clarisse's charity galas. She held a glass of vintage Moreaux wine, the last bottle from the vineyard before she'd burned it. "To those who told me I didn't belong," she said, voice amplified across the ballroom. "To those who taught me how to serve, and made me unstoppable. To those who wrote me off, thank you for the paper trail." A laugh rippled through the crowd. She raised her glass. "And to my mother, Amelia, who left me a name and the fire to claim it. Tonight, we don't bow. We rise. Cheers. Glasses clinked. The orchestra swelled. And somewhere, in the distance, the cries of two exiles echoed behind iron gates. Chapter 20 The Secret Child. The house had been reclaimed. The name rebranded. The marble replaced, the title restored, the ghosts unearthed and exorcised. But Rosehill still had secrets. And one of them had been waiting, alive, breathing, watching from afar. It began with a letter. Delivered by hand, no return address, sealed in wax. Not Lina's signature red or the Moreaux family's gold. But a simple symbol etched in black ink. A crescent moon over a rose. Lina opened it in her study, beneath the painting of her mother. The message inside was only 2 lines. You don't know me, but I know you. Tell Clarice her first mistake is all grown up now. Lina froze. She called Dumas. Within hours, his private intelligence team swept every archive, birth record, immigration database, and school registry they could find. And then, confirmation. Clarice had a second child. Not Julian. Not from Lionel. But from a previous relationship with a foreign diplomat, hidden before her marriage into the Moreaux line. Conceived in scandal. Born in Morocco. Erased from public record. The child was a girl. Lucienne. Now 22. Living in Madrid under an alias. Independent. Unaffiliated. Quiet, until now. Clarice had kept her secret for 2 decades, not out of love, but out of strategy. Because if Lucienne's existence ever came to light, it would taint the perfect French dynasty Clarice had spent her life polishing with lies. She didn't hide Lucienne to protect her, Dumas said grimly. She hid her to protect herself. By blood, Lucienne was Clarice's daughter. Which meant she could file an inheritance claim against the Moreaux estate, against Rosehill, against Lina. But unlike Julian, Lucienne hadn't grown up entitled. She'd grown up in the shadows, like Lina. With questions. With rage. With hunger. And Lina knew something important. If I don't reach her first, Clarice will. Lina wrote her own letter. No envelope. No crest. Just a page of handwritten truth. I know what it's like to be hidden. To be treated like a stain on someone else's silk. You are not alone. You are not a mistake. But if you want to know the truth, the full truth, come to Rosehill. Come not as a threat, but as a sister. And I will show you everything Clarice tried to erase. She signed it not as Lady Moreaux. Just, Lina. She enclosed the diary page where Amelia had mentioned the strange girl with Clarice's eyes. A girl Amelia had seen once, years ago, before Clarice erased her entirely. And then, she waited. 1 week later, a sleek car arrived at the Rosehill gates. The guards paused. Double-checked the list. Looked at Lina. She nodded. The car pulled through. Out stepped a young woman. Tall. Olive skin. Raven black hair. Wide-set hazel eyes filled with guarded fire. Wearing leather boots, a long cream coat, and a pendant with a crescent moon and rose. Lucienne. She said nothing at first. Just stared at the estate, jaw tight. Eyes flicking across the grounds like a battlefield she'd trained for in dreams. Lina approached slowly. Welcome to your mother's legacy, she said, voice low. Would you like to tear it apart with me? Lucienne looked at her. And smiled. Chapter 21 Theo returns, with scars. For weeks, his absence was a bruise beneath every victory. Lina had reclaimed her name, her home, and her power, but not her peace. Because Theo was still missing. His kidnapping had become a ghost story whispered through elite circles. No official statement. No ransom demand. No clues, until one came from the unlikeliest of places, a dockworker in Marseille. The man had stumbled upon an abandoned shipping container marked with false manifests. Inside, barely any food, a cot, 2 empty water jugs, and Theo, unconscious but breathing. Dumas found her pacing the Rosehill garden under a bruised sunset when he got the call. "He's alive," he said. They found him. Marseille. Lina didn't blink. Didn't cry. She simply said, "Ready the jet." The private plane roared into the sky less than 2 hours later, with Lina alone on board. No assistant. No press. No security. Just her and the silence she refused to break until she had him back. She touched down in Marseille under cover of night. A black SUV waited on the tarmac, engine running. When she stepped into the hospital suite, she stopped breathing. Theo sat upright in the bed. Paler. Thinner. Eyes sunken, a fresh scar along his jawline. One arm in a sling. But he was alive. More than that, he was smiling. "Nice jet," he rasped. "Miss me?" She crossed the room and collapsed into his arms, careful not to hurt him, but unable to stop her fingers from gripping his shirt, like she was anchoring herself to reality. "You idiot," she whispered, voice shaking. "You could have died." "I tried," he said. "Didn't take." They stayed like that for a long time. The jet cabin was quiet, luxurious, lined in cream leather and silence. Theo rested under a cashmere blanket, head tilted toward the window. Lina sat across from him, watching him, her eyes sharper now, not with grief, but with clarity. "They locked you in a box," she said finally. "Because they knew what you were worth to me." He didn't answer. She leaned forward, placed something on the table between them, a black folder stamped in gold. "So I'm putting your name on everything next." He frowned. "I don't." "This isn't a proposal," she interrupted. "Not the romantic kind, anyway." She opened the folder. Inside, schematics. Architectural designs. Brand logos. Corporate registries filed in multiple countries. "It's an empire," she said. Hotels. Media. Design. Restoration. All built on the ruins of Rosehill and the girls they tried to erase. "You want in?" Theo stared at her. His eyes, still bruised, lit from within. "Only if I get an office with a view." She smiled. "You'll get the whole top floor." He leaned back, wincing slightly. "Then I guess I'm yours." "You always were," she said softly. "Even when I didn't know what I'd become." By the time they landed in Paris, the press had caught wind of the rescue. Drones circled the jet. Paparazzi screamed on the edge of the tarmac. But Lina didn't care. She walked out first, Theo behind her, and they held their ground like war veterans stepping off the battlefield, scarred, yes, but undefeated. And above them, painted on the tail of the jet in bold silver letters, Lina. This was no longer a rescue mission. It was a declaration of war on erasure. And Theo. He wasn't the sidekick. He was her partner in empire. Chapter 22. The Inheritance War Goes Global. The war should have ended in Paris. Lina had won the courtroom, the house, the people. Clarice had fainted under pressure. Julian had disappeared into quiet disgrace. And yet, like a snake that sheds its skin only to strike again, Julian returned, this time, with venom sharpened by foreign gold. Because if he couldn't own Rosehill, he would try to burn it internationally. It began with a headline. Breaking, Moreaux family scandal reignites as billionaire heiress alleges forgery in heiress trial. Lina's phone didn't stop vibrating for an hour. Dumas forwarded 12 press leaks, 4 subpoenas, and 1 intercepted email thread marked Operation Eclipse. At the center of it all, Julian Moreaux and a woman named Nadja Volkov-Ayala, a Eurasian banking heiress and tech magnate with holdings in 6 countries and a history of shadowy corporate warfare. Tall, silver blonde, surgically precise in both diction and aesthetic, Nadja was the kind of woman who never spoke more than necessary, but when she did, governments listened. And now she was aligning with Julian, claiming that Lina had forged her mother's diary and manipulated the DNA tests. Worse, Nadja had filed a formal case in Monaco's High Commercial Court, where she kept residency and where the Moreaux family had long maintained a secret account connected to off-the-books estate assets. This wasn't just personal. It was geopolitical. Lina sat in her Rosehill study as storm clouds brewed over the countryside, the letter of summons from the Monaco court in her lap, printed on ivory vellum and signed with a golden crest. Dumas paste. They've found a crack in the jurisdiction. They're claiming that a portion of the inheritance, the Moreaux offshore investments, fall under Monegasque control. Which means we fight on their turf now. Lina didn't blink. Then I'll fly in and take their kingdom too. Dumas paused. This isn't Paris. Monaco plays by older rules. Royalty still matters. Appearances carry weight. So do facts, Lina said coldly. And I have them all. The trial began inside a chandeliered courtroom tucked above the Place du Casino, golden chairs, velvet walls, and ancient men in silk robes pretending justice wasn't just a game for the rich. Lina arrived in a white pantsuit with a cape that whispered across marble. She wore no jewelry except a black diamond on one ear and her mother's signet ring on her right hand. Beside her, Dumas, now armed with digital forensics, sworn depositions, and video footage of Julian discussing inheritance manipulation before he knew the cameras were rolling. Across the aisle, Julian, perfectly rehearsed, his smirk oily. And Nadja, radiant and lethal in silver silk, tapping her manicured nails against her diamond-studded phone. They weren't just trying to destroy Lina's win. They were trying to recast her as a fraud. She manipulated documents, Nadja's lawyer declared to the court. She orchestrated a narrative. Staged an uprising. This was not justice, it was a coup. Lina stood. When the court allowed her to speak, she stepped forward, eyes locked on Nadja. No one forged anything, she said. No one faked being hidden in a servant's closet. Or buried in lies. She opened a folder and handed it to the court. A notarized letter Clarice had written, threatening to erase the bastard child. The original, unaltered will. Footage of Julian negotiating hush money with a tabloid. A private letter from Nadja's former assistant, admitting she'd offered to buy Lina's silence 6 months earlier. The courtroom tilted. Even Monaco's polished masks couldn't hide the tension. Nadja narrowed her eyes. Julian finally looked afraid. The press storm was international now. British tabloids, Russian bloggers, American financial watchdogs, everyone was watching. They all wanted to see if Lina could hold the crown she'd claimed in France when forced onto a foreign battlefield. And she did. Not with rage, but with precision. She posed for exactly one photo on the marble steps of the courthouse. She wore sunglasses, gloves, and that same defiant calm she'd worn the day Clarice collapsed. And when a reporter shouted, "Is this the end of the Moreaux legacy?" she turned, smiled faintly, and replied, "No. It's the beginning of mine." Chapter 23 The Assassination Attempt in Venice. Venice shimmered like a dream that refused to wake. The canals rippled under golden moonlight. Candlelit gondolas drifted like silent ghosts. Palazzas flickered with the glow of chandeliers and champagne-fueled laughter. It was a city designed for secrets, decadence, and betrayal. And tonight, it was hosting the most exclusive event of the season, the Ball of Eternal Light, a black and gold masquerade for royalty, oligarchs, heiresses, and the dangerously ambitious. Lina was among them. Her empire had become global. Her face graced covers of magazines from Tokyo to New York. And yet, the whispers hadn't stopped. About the Moreaux trial. The court battle in Monaco. The mysterious heiress she'd recently brought into the fold, Lucienne. But there was another whisper now. A new one. One that made Lina feel, for the first time since reclaiming Rosehill, that she was no longer the only predator in the room. Lina arrived at the Venetian ball by gondola. She wore a plunging, backless black velvet gown that clung to her like a second skin, with a midnight feathered cape trailing behind her like a shadow. Over her face, a handcrafted mask of onyx and silver, shaped like the Roman goddess of justice. The guests turned when she entered the palazzo. Not because they didn't recognize her, but because they did. The woman who had dethroned France's most feared matriarch. The woman who had walked out of courtrooms like runways. Now, walking through a Venetian masquerade like she owned the night. She spotted Lucienne across the ballroom, dressed in gold, eyes veiled behind a delicate crescent moon mask, her dark hair cascading in loose waves. They locked eyes. A nod passed between them. But moments later, someone slipped Lina a note on thick parchment, slid beneath her wine glass by a masked waiter. It read, "Not all your sisters are loyal." Her pulse didn't spike. She merely smiled. Because she knew exactly what that meant. Lucienne was not the only secret daughter Clarice had tried to bury. There was another. And this one hadn't come to join the table. She'd come to flip it. It was close to midnight when Lina stepped out onto the grand stone balcony overlooking the Grand Canal. The music drifted behind her, violins and murmured laughter, the sound of elegance trying to mask the primal hunger in everyone's eyes. She stood at the edge, the breeze teasing her gown, watching the moonlight dance over water. And then, a shift. A presence behind her. Too quiet. Too still. She turned, too late. A masked woman in a crimson gown lunged. Her hands gripped Lina's shoulders and shoved, hard, toward the stone railing. But Lina didn't fall. Years of training. Trauma. Survival. She twisted mid-shove, grabbed the woman's mask, and yanked. It tore off in her hand. And for a second, the world narrowed to two women. A face like Clarice's. Younger. Harsher. Eyes like acid and mirrors. The woman snarled, trying again. Lina slammed her elbow into the attacker's ribs and pinned her to the railing, mask in one hand, daggered look in the other. "Who are you?" The girl spat blood and fury. The one she really loved. The one she sent away to keep clean. "You think you're the rightful heir? I was the golden child, until you started digging. Lina stared at her. Then why try to kill me now? Because you won, she whispered. And we don't survive women like you. Security burst onto the balcony. Dumas appeared seconds later, pistol already drawn, eyes scanning for more. Lina raised one hand. She won't run. She didn't. She merely stood there, trembling, furious, undone. And as they dragged the girl away, Lina finally saw the truth. Clarisse hadn't raised one monster. She had bred an entire bloodline of them. And now they were waking up, one by one. The Venetian press exploded. Heiress survives attempted murder at masquerade. Second secret Moreaux daughter exposed. Masked betrayal under the stars. Lina didn't give interviews. She simply issued one line in her official statement. Let them come. I know how to clean blood from marble. Chapter 24 The Final Twist. Rosehill stood still in the early morning fog, its glass floors glowing faintly from beneath like the bones of something ancient and unsleeping. Lina hadn't slept. Not after Venice. Not after the attack. Not after that girl's face, so horribly familiar, like looking into a darker mirror. She sat at her mother's desk, staring at the blooded masquerade mask, crimson velvet, torn where she'd ripped it free from the attacker's face. She turned it over again and again, as if it would finally explain itself. And then Dumas entered, his voice quiet. Tense. We have the test results. Lina rose. Tell me. She's not just Clarisse's daughter, he said. She's yours too. Lina blinked. Impossible. She's your twin. The DNA results didn't lie. The girl who tried to kill her in Venice had not been another Moreaux daughter. She had been the same. A twin. Born minutes after Lina. Hidden immediately. Split at birth by Clarisse herself to protect the inheritance from being divided, and to preserve her own claim to power. One heiress was dangerous enough. Two was unmanageable. Amelia, Lina's mother, had written about the pain of childbirth in her hidden diary. About feeling as though she'd lost more than one. Now Lina understood why. Clarisse had taken the second child. Raised her in secret. Trained her like a weapon. And then abandoned her the moment she no longer fit the narrative. Just like she'd done with everyone. The girl, her name was Seraphine, was held in a private wing of a secure medical clinic near Lake Geneva. She hadn't spoken since the night of the gala. But Lina came anyway. She entered the white room alone, shutting the door behind her with a soft click. Seraphine sat on the bed, pale, restrained, silent. The bruises from their struggle had begun to fade. Her hair was identical to Lina's. So were the eyes. So were the hands. It was like staring at her own rage, magnified. They told me, Lina said gently. About you. Seraphine didn't respond. We shared a womb. A heartbeat. And then Clarisse split us like an inheritance she didn't want to share. Finally, Seraphine looked at her. You lived in sunlight. I lived in her shadow. I lived in her servants' quarters, Lina said bitterly. There was no sunlight. Silence again. Until Seraphine spoke, voice like silk caught on glass. You want your happy ending. Lina nodded slowly. I want my truth. Then take it, Seraphine said, rising. She reached into a small side drawer and pulled out a faded photograph, two infants, wrapped in matching pink blankets. One tagged E. Moreaux. The other marked simply S. Their birth date, the same. Seraphine handed it to Lina. "I won't fight you," she said. "Not anymore." "Why?" Seraphine's voice broke for the first time. "Because I was never meant to exist." She made sure of that. "But if you become the woman they all forgive, then everything she did to me gets washed away." She stepped closer. "Inches apart now, the air electric. So take the house. Take the name. Take the crown. But promise me one thing. Never forgive them. Not Clarice. Not Julian. Not the world that let it happen." Lina's heart thudded. "Why?" "Because if you forgive them, you free them. And they don't deserve it." Lina didn't answer. She just looked at her sister, her twin, this ghost carved from the same blood but molded by darkness. And slowly, solemnly, she nodded. She left the clinic in silence, the photo still clutched in her hand. Back at Rosehill, the house seemed different. As if it knew the truth had finally reached the surface. 2 children. 1 mother. 1 empire shattered and rebuilt. Lina climbed the grand staircase and looked out over the estate, the morning light glowing across the hills. She hadn't just inherited land or money. She'd inherited a lie so enormous, it had split her very self in two. But now she was whole again. Not healed. Whole. And forgiveness. That could wait. Chapter 25 The Crowned Heiress. The gates of Rosehill opened wide, not for royalty, not for billionaires, not for secret heirs or corrupt board members. This time, they opened for girls. Not girls born into empires. But girls who had scrubbed steps, answered to bells, swallowed their voices, and learned to survive in silence. Lina had invited them all, orphaned girls from Marseille, displaced students from Moreaux, foster children from the Paris banlieues, each hand-picked, each with a letter sealed in gold that read, "You are no one's shadow. Come home." Lina. It was no longer a mansion. It was a beacon. The crystal chandeliers still glittered, but the walls now bore portraits of powerful women erased from textbooks. The ballroom had become a lecture hall. The dining room transformed into a study garden, lined with rare books and velvet reading chairs. The upstairs chambers, once forbidden to servants, were now dormitories for the first 30 students of the Rosehill Institute for Power and Legacy. Free education. Private mentors. Global internships. No one here learned to serve. They learned to rule. The reopening was televised in 5 languages and streamed to millions. Rosehill's once oppressive white marble now gleamed beneath the sunlight filtering through stained glass windows that Lina herself had commissioned. Each panel told her story, not as myth, but as memoir. One showed a young girl with a mop. Another, a woman standing in a courtroom. The last, a crowned silhouette, wrapped in fire. Photographers filled the garden. Media outlets were lined in rows, whispering in awe as Lina emerged onto the balcony. She wore a flaming red couture gown, sculpted at the waist and flowing into a train that billowed like a banner. The color was not just fashion, it was a statement. Fire. Rage. Rebirth. Her mask was off. Her crown was invisible. But her power was undeniable. In her arms, she carried a baby wrapped in white lace, Theo's niece, recently orphaned and now legally under Lina's guardianship. A symbol. A seed of the next chapter. As the crowd hushed, Lina stepped forward. Flashes fired. Cameras clicked. And then, with no script, no speech, no PR rehearsals, she turned slowly toward them, the baby safe against her heart, and said, "I cleaned every floor in this place. Now it scrubs for me." A beat of silence. And then, the crowd erupted. Applause. Cheers. Journalists weeping. Women across the globe texting the quote to their daughters. Up in the hills, a small television in a nursing estate flickered. Clarice watched, pale and forgotten. And as Lina's voice echoed through the screen, Clarice dropped her teacup. It shattered like her legacy. The cameras panned across the estate as golden curtains swept over the balcony, sealing the moment like the final page of a legend. And as they closed, so did the story. Of the girl who once slept on servants' sheets. Of the daughter they tried to bury. Of the maid they underestimated. She wasn't just the heiress. She was the crown. The house didn't just belong to her. It was her. And from now on, it would serve her name. Lina. Epilogue, the house that knew her name. The wind swept through the corridors of Rosehill like a whisper of memory. Night had fallen. The guests were gone. The flowers from the reopening ball had begun to wilt. The champagne flutes sat rinsed in rows. And somewhere inside the estate, the ghosts stirred for the last time. Lina walked alone now, barefoot across the glass floor she once scrubbed, the moonlight beneath her feet like ice. She passed the dining room, where Clarice once sipped wine and spat cruelty. Past the parlor, where her mother had once wept behind locked doors. And she reached the final hallway. The door at the end had always been locked. Always too heavy. Too dangerous. Too secret. But now, it swung open. Inside, the last room untouched since the fall of the Moreaux legacy. Her mother's room. Not the public version, the hidden one behind the wardrobe, lined in cedar and regret. A place only Bellamy had known. Lina entered and lit a single match. The walls were covered in photographs, Lina as a baby. A girl holding a mop. A pageant crown, a spilled tray, a smear of blood. And tucked behind one frame, a final letter. Written in Amelia's hand. To my daughter, wherever you are, if they ever try to make you small, remember, you are made of my fire. You are what they fear. You are what they tried to keep out of the mirror. But one day, that mirror will reflect your throne. Lina's hands trembled as she folded the letter. Her eyes shone with something too heavy to name. Outside, the estate glowed under starlight. Girls studied under lamps. The staff laughed over midnight tea. The house had never felt more alive. And yet, it was quiet. Because the fight was over. The crown had not been given. It had been taken. In the distance, the old Moreaux nameplate sat rusting in a garden shed. Forgotten. Replaced on the front gate by one blazing, backlit name. Lina, the girl they made clean it. Now owned it. Forever. Fade to black. Because every broken heart deserves a comeback. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional romance every week. Hit like, drop a comment, and ring the bell so you never miss a moment of betrayal, redemption, and powerful love. And don't keep the drama to yourself, share this story with someone who lives for twists just like you. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is becoming unforgettable.